For the trick bite, this first one you needed to solve. So you could have done one of two things. Either distribute and solve for x like that, or divide both sides by 3 and solve like that. Either or would have been fine because I can divide negative 39 by 3 and get a whole answer. But most of you distributed. So you would solve for x by adding 3 and divide by 8. So x equals negative 2. Is your final answer? Questions on that one? For number 2, was this relation a function?
No.
No. And why was it not?
Because negative 1's okay.
They repeat and go to different y values. If I had negative 1, 3 and negative 1, 3, that would have been a function because it's the same x going to the same y. It is repeated as well. For number 3, we needed to translate the equation 3 times the difference of a number and 7 is 18. Anyone want to give their answer? That one, go ahead.
Parentheses x minus 7 equals 18.
Correct.
And in that I found x to be 15.
For this one, you didn't need to solve it, but I think that was the answer if you solved it. Questions on those 3? For number 4, so this is like your career questions, all of those types of questions, where you'll kind of have like 2 parts putting one into the other. So important things, the Buffalo Bills scored 24 more than twice the number of points. I would circle, highlight, underline this part. Also, altogether, they scored 66 points, and we're looking for how many did each score. So you needed 2 variables to define 2 variables because there are 2 things you don't know. You could have used whatever variables you wanted. I'm going to use B and M. So if you did not do this part, off to the side, make sure you write this part. So I'm using B and M to represent the number of points the Buffalo Bills scored. That looks like a B and a D, but it's supposed to be a B and a B. And then M for the number of points the Miami Dolphins scored. I don't know if that was better or worse. Yes. So I'm going to write the entire thing, how you would solve this entire thing. Because you should end up with 2 answers, one for B, one for M. And then, Kat, did you have a question? Or did you want to?
No, I wanted
Let me set it up and then. So what we know about the Buffalo Bills is that they scored 24 more than, so we're adding twice the number of points the Miami Dolphins scored, so I can say 2 times M. We know that together, if I were to add them, I would get 66. I don't know what either of those things are, B or M, but I do know that B equals this part, so I can put this in for B. And solve. So to solve this part, let me do that. you would first add, combine like terms, so 3m plus 1m is 3m. And then you would subtract 24 to get the variable by itself. You get 3m equals 42. Then you would divide each side by 3. Which would get you m equaling 14. And then you can put that back in the one. And yeah. So you have a choice. You can either put this back here, or you can put this here. Either or, you're going to get the same answer. This one would probably be easier. But you could also put it back in that original one. So we have Miami Dolphins scored 14 points, Buffalo Bills scored 52 points. Any questions on that one? For the last one, you have two fractions that equal each other. When that happens, how do we start solving this? Cross multiply, yes? Remember that I just wrote that backwards. 3 and 2. You can have this on this side or this on this side. That part doesn't matter. So you and then take something you want to move. Say you're done. 3. Okay. So by subtracting, if that's not how you started solving this, it's okay. Don't erase. Because we moved our constant over, we have to move our variable over by subtracting it. So we get x equals -9. Questions on that one? Alright. Everyone should have a review on their desk. We're going to go through some of those problems. Again, just as before, put a star or mark any questions that we skip over that you want to go over. If you have time at the end of class, we will do that. So let's start with number 1. Just so you know, these special case solutions, no solution, infinitely many, really only works if there's variables on both sides. However, there may be an example or a question that if you have the variables on the same side, if they cancel each other out, then you may get one of those special case solutions. But in general, you have to have variables on both sides to have one of those type of solutions. Okay, so for number 1, we would need to distribute. Remember that this is really -1 that we're distributing. So this would become -5x plus 10 minus x minus 2. I could combine my like terms. -5x minus x would give me -6x. 10 minus 2 would give me a +8. In this case, none of my variables canceled each other out. I only have one variable on one side, so this is going to give me one solution. X equals some number. keep solving this, subtract 8 and divide by negative 6. X would equal negative 7. I did not show this to you before because I wanted you to be able to solve these, but if you wanted to check yourself, yes, you could put it back in the way I showed you before, put 7 back in, or negative 7 back in, solve it, or put negative 7 into this part, put in your calculator, see if it equals 50. Both of those still work. I'm going to show you 2 additional ways you can check yourself. Actually, I made to show you one because I think the Desmos calculator you're going to have is not going to be the exact one. So another way on your calculator, if I know my x is negative 7, I'll go back to that if you still need it. I could do one of 2 things. I could put negative 7 in for all of my x's. So negative 5, parentheses, negative 7, minus 2, minus negative 7, plus 2, then I could go in and I could put, I'm looking for the test, so that's above math. So if you hit second and then hit math, you'll get the equal sign. And I could put in 50. When you do this, the calculator computes this and it gives you basically right or wrong. 1 is you did this right, 0 is you did this wrong. So if you put this in and you get a 1, then you can say, okay, I checked it, it's fine. If you get a 0, something you either put in is wrong or your answer is wrong. It won't tell you what specifically. That's the issue. If you didn't want to type in negative 7 everywhere using all those parentheses, you could also store negative 7 into your calculator. So if I put negative 7 and I press this STO button at the bottom, an arrow pops up. And then I can press this X button next to alpha and hit enter, and it'll store negative 7 for X. So I could go back to this equation, hit enter. I'm going to take out all the negative 7s and just put X. So it looks just like the equation on the paper, but I now have negative 7 stored for X, so it's kind of the same thing as this. And I can hit enter, and it'll still do that same thing, give you a 1 or a 0. If you had the graphing calculator on Desmos, you could put in this part of the equation with the variable, and it would graph at a single place what the answer is, and you could check yourself that way. But you guys won't have that one. You'll just have the scientific calculator. Any questions on number 1? We're going to jump down to number 8. Remember, all of this is going to be one objective. solving multi-step equations with variables on one side, solving multi-step equations with variables on both sides. Proportions will be in there. All of that will be one objective. So for number 8, I have fractions that equal each other. I would start solving that by cross multiplying. And when you cross multiply, if you want to go ahead and multiply as you rewrite it, so instead of doing this step, go into the next one, 6a minus 18 equals 3a minus 18. If you want to go ahead and step directly into that step, that's fine. Just be careful, because if that step is incorrect, the rest of your work is going to be incorrect. And if you jump into that one, I just need to be able to see what you did wrong, if it is wrong. From this one, I see variables on both sides. I see that these two coefficients are different, so this one is going to have one solution, a equals some number. We can take something and move it. What do we want to move?
Don't the one on the left.
So we could add 18, really, we'd be doing it to both, so it doesn't matter. But what happens here is that they both cancel. So we would then need to move all the variables to one side. Because we don't really have a constant anymore, that side doesn't matter. But in my personal opinion, I would move the 3 instead of moving the 6 so you don't end up with a negative, but it doesn't matter either way. And then to get a by itself, divide. Zero can be an answer. 0 is a solution. So I would not put no solution because 0 is 1. Just don't let that confuse you. Questions on that one? Oh, there was another one I wanted to do on this page that I forgot. So we're going to go back to number 4 and then go to the next page. Okay, well, let me know when you got it. So let's go back to number 4 and then we'll go to the next page. So start this one off by distributing. After we distribute, the variable term and the constant are in different places on both sides. That's okay. But when I look at them and I compare them, the negative, these both have a negative 7a. So they have the same coefficient, but they have different constants. What type of solution will this be? They have the same coefficient, but different constants. No. So again, if you see that, you do not need to continue solving. But it's okay if you continue solving as well. So I could add 7a to both sides and get 21 equals 11, but they really don't equal. So if you see that before you keep solving, you don't have to keep solving, but if you would rather keep solving, that's fine as well. On to the next page. One of your objectives is just going to be solving absolute value equations. So we're going to do 13 and 14. Remember your steps for solving these equations. You need to first isolate the absolute value expression. So for 13, we need to get rid of the -4. Pretend that the absolute value is like a variable and we're solving to get everything away from that variable. So we would divide both sides by -4. And then once that absolute value sign is isolated, set the inside equal to a positive and a negative version of 8 and solve. Without the absolute value sign.
Wait, that's for number 11. That should be-
No, these both are for 13. I just don't have space. You may have more space to write, I just don't. Just subtract 6. And divide both by 2. And remember to write them as a solution set least to greatest. W equals -7, 1. -14 divided by 2. Yes, so anytime you have absolute value signs, you have to take this and make it a positive and a negative. Remember, it measures distance, so it's the positive and negative version of it.
I'm confused.
On which part?
All of it.
Which part did you get confused at?
So what is W equals number 7, 1?
Where did I get those from?
Yeah.
After we solve this one and solve this one, we have to put it in this format.
So there's 2 answers. Okay.
Alright, for 14, same thing, we need to isolate the variables to get everything away from it first. So we would add 9. And then divide both sides by 5. Once there is nothing else left by the absolute value sign, we can set the inside equal to both a positive and negative 8. And solve both of them for x. Add 4 to both sides. And divide both sides by 4. Writing them as a solution set least to greatest, that would be x equals -1, 3. Questions on either of those two? Remember that if you have a negative number out here and once you isolate the absolute value expression, if this number is still negative on the outside, or when it equals, that would be a no solution. You cannot solve that one. We're going to do 16 and 17. For 16, as part of their government class, Maddie and Ryan had to log volunteer hours in the community. Ryan volunteered for one more than 3 times the number of hours Maddie did. Altogether, they volunteered in their community for 45 hours. How many hours did Ryan volunteer? So important pieces of information. The one more than 3 times the number of hours Maddie did. It's important.
I should have used time Maddie's hours first.
Yeah, we're gonna end up finding Maddie's hours first. Altogether, they volunteered 45 hours. And the question only asks about Ryan's hours, but in order to find Ryan's hours, we have to find Maddie's. So this one does not give you variables, so you need to define them. You can use M and R, X and Y, it does not matter. I'm going to write a lot of this stuff in 15 because I don't have space, but you should be able to write it in 16. So I'll say M will be the number of hours Maddie volunteered. And Ryan, or R will be the number of hours Ryan volunteered. Once we know our variables, we can start putting these together, pieces and parts. So we know this first sentence talks about Ryan. One more than 3 times the number of hours Maddie did. How would we put that together?
1 plus 3 p.m.
If you use a different variable, that's fine. Altogether, we know that they volunteered 45 hours. That means if we added R and M, we would get 45. We don't know what M is, but we know that R is this 1 plus 3M, so we can put that in for R. And then we can start solving for M, and then go back and solve for R. So we would combine like terms, subtract the 1 from both sides. Already running out of space. Divide both sides by 4. And make sure you have that unit. So we're looking for number of hours. So it would be 11 hours. Then you could do one of two things. Either put 11 back in here, solve for R, or put 11 in here and solve for R. Either or, does not matter. Whichever one you do, you should get 34 hours. Any questions about that? And then number 17, remember the setup is kind of similar. We don't have to define our variables because it's just going to be L and W. Rectangle has a length of 6 inches less than twice its width. The perimeter is 54 inches. We need to find the dimensions, so we need to find both L and W. Remember that perimeter is P equals 2 times your length plus 2 times your width, or adding up all your sides. How would we set up this equation for our length? 6 inches less than twice its width.
So 6 minus W?
What does that less than tell you to do?
W minus 6.
So we have to move that to the end, 2W minus 6. Now that we know what our equation for our length is, we can put that into our perimeter equation as well as the 54 that they told us. We can solve for W and then solve for L. I'm going to start writing in box 18, but it's still 17. You may have space to write it all in 17. So combine the terms, add 12 to both sides. And divide. And then this one was inches. Make sure you have that unit. And then we can put 11 back in for L, or we can put it back in here. either or. I'm just gonna put it back in for L. We have 22 minus 6. L would be what? So for the word problem ones, you may get the perimeter questions. You may get ones like the 16. I could not find examples from where I pulled them from. But remember the post office question where it has like a flat rate and it's per ounce or something like that? You may see one like that. I don't believe there are examples like that in this, but if you go back to the first set of notes we did, there are examples like that there. Or the two-step equations word problems that you guys were supposed to do a few weeks ago. There'll be examples like that. The next page, we're just going to do one example from this page. Number 3. Yeah. Something else. Right, number 3, we need to distribute. You have like terms on the same sides you can combine. Remember, when you're combining like terms, you're just doing whatever it says, not the opposite. We could continue solving this, but this is going to be a special case. We have the same coefficient and different constants. What type of solution would that be? Say no solution. Remember, if it's exactly the same, it would be infinitely many. If you didn't see that and kept going, you would get -3 equals 6, but they don't really equal. Then we're going to skip to this page. I'm going to do 11 and 12. Asks which of these have no solutions? Some of them, actually all of them, you would need to quickly solve and see. Only one of these can be the right answer since it's multiple choice. So if I combine these, we have 9x plus 9. Would A give me no solutions? No, because they're identical. That would be IMS. Infinitely many solutions. I could distribute to get 6x plus 30, and then combine x and 6x to get 7x plus 30. Would that one give me no solution?
Infinite.
Again, that's IMS. 2 minus 7x would give me negative 5x. Would that one give me no
Minus.
solution? So it has to be D. And in this case, process of elimination, I don't really need to do that work, but I could just to make sure. But if you got a question like this, I would say don't solve it completely. Remember those things that make it a special case. If it looks identical on both sides, it's infinitely many. If they have the same coefficient but different constants, it's no solution. For number 12, it asks which line contains an error. So when it says line 2, it means from step 1 to step 2, something wrong happened. So in line 1 to line 2, what did they do there?
Distribute.
Okay. Did they distribute correctly?
Yeah.
I heard yeses and no.
No,
Those of you that said no, why no?
Because
Yeah.
when they go -2 to -10, they put
No.
-10. It's supposed to be a +10 because you're multiplying to -2.
She's right. The line 4 is also missing.
Well, because that second line is messed up, everything else will be.
Yeah.
There might, I'm gonna redo this. What if instead of distributing first, they did this? And kept going. What did I do from that first step to the second step?
Divided by 2, but it was supposed to be -2, so
I was just making up a problem,
Oh.
so it didn't need to match
Oh,
one
never mind, I got confused.
So if they did this instead of distributing, that would not be wrong as long as they did this to everything. So they would have to divide this by 2, this by 2, and this by 2. If they didn't do that, it would be wrong. So you might get a question like that. Try not to be tricked.
They would have added the 6 plus 2 then divided
That would also be incorrect. Because the 2 is being multiplied to the parentheses, the 6 isn't, so they have to do that first. Right. Were there any questions that you saw that you wanted to go over specifically?
Number 18.
This one. I said you won't see a number like this, but we can go back and do that. And then this number 18. These are very much the same, but we can do both. You won't see either of those on there, but we can do them. Okay. So for 15, you're looking for two numbers. It tells you something about the larger number. One is going to be larger, one is going to be smaller. You have to find both of them. So the larger number is 5 more than twice the smaller number. Their sum is 80. So I can say L and S for larger or smaller, that part, you don't need to define the variables for this one. But a larger number is, we're going to be setting that equal, 5 more than twice the smaller number. How would I set that up?
L equals 5 plus, oh, 2S.
2S. So don't confuse this L with length. This is larger number, smaller number. And then it says the sum is 80. So if I knew what the larger number was and I knew what the smaller number was, if I added them together, I'd get 80. So the rest of this is very similar to these other two questions. Put L into this equation and solve. So we could combine our S's. Subtract 5 on both sides. I don't really have space for that. And divide both sides by 3. So for those type of problems, you wouldn't need a unit because they're just looking for numbers. You could say unit, 25 units, but that's good. And then put S either back in here or back in here to find L. What is that, 55? So the process to solve it is the same as the others, it just, the words are different. There's one section of just word problems.
How many more problems do we have?
I want to say it's 4, but I can look. Yeah, so it's only 4 word problems, but in the test, it's like write the equation for one question and then solve it for the next. Write the equation and solve it. Write the equation and solve it.
May I learn to faster?
Okay, and then Abu, you want to see 18. I'm just going to do this for fun. The sum of 2 consecutive odd numbers is 148. So when we're counting, if I wanted to count by 2s, I would add 2. If I want to count by odd numbers, I'm going to add 1. So every odd number is going to be a some number plus 1. we would have one odd and then another odd. So we're gonna take this and add it twice. And the sum is supposed to be 148. I feel like I started setting that up wrong. Hold on. I don't know if this is that right. Okay, I was close. So I was kind of close. The first number is just going to be the first odd. Again, you will not see a question like this. This is why I also did not go over these ones. The second one, I mixed up. So we're letting the first number be some x or n, whatever. The second number be whatever it is plus 2. We're still adding them together, but it would be set up like this. Then you would start solving it, combine the terms, get x by itself. This would tell you what the first of the, what the first number
And then
is.
you minus it by 48.
Hmm?
You subtract it by 48.
You don't even really have to do that. Since it said the first one is x, the second one is x plus 2, you can just add 2. Were there any other ones that we wanted to go through together?
For number 17, right?
Uh-huh.
So when it says the rectangle of the beam 6 inches less than twice its width, does it mean both of them combined or just one?
You're talking about both of the lengths.
Like the length is 6 less than both of the widths combined, or just
Oh
one?
no. Is this talking about one of the widths? Because it said twice. That's why you got that. This would just be like if you took one of the widths, multiplied it by 2, and subtracted 6, it would equal one of the lengths.
Yeah.
Any others that we want to go over? If not, I'm going to pull up one of the Khan Academy word problem questions from a couple weeks ago. We'll do one of those and then I'll let you practice for the remainder of class. Some of you may have already started practicing, and that's fine.
Could I sit next to Naima, like when we're practicing?
Okay, I was trying to find one. Yeah, so like one like this. Can I write on the same? Okay, so for this one, and I know this is a little small, but I'll read it. It says, in winter, the price of apples suddenly went up 75 cents per pound. Sam bought 3 pounds of apples as the new price for a total of $5.88. So we know it went up 75 cents per pound. He bought 3 pounds of apples. We know the new price is $5.88. So for this one, we need to write an equation. We need to find the original price. Because the original price went up 75 cents, we're going to add 75 cents to some x or p. Because whatever it originally was, we don't know what that amount is, but we know it went up 75 cents. Yes. Yeah, I haven't finished it yet. We also know that we bought 3 pounds of apples, so whatever this is, we need to multiply this by 3. Fine. Yes, okay. Okay, thank you.
What's that?
Don't know. And we know the total equals 588. So this would be our equation for this. Pay attention to those words, because sometimes you'll need parentheses, sometimes you won't. And it really depends on the question. And then to find the original price, we would solve this for P. So I don't have my calculator up. I'm going to have you guys help me. What's 3 times 0.75? I feel like I know the answer to that, but...
2.25.
This is what I was thinking. And then to get P by itself, we would subtract. So 3P equals 3, 6, and then divide. Again, you guys have your calculator. Tell me what that would be. 0.2, 1.2. I just didn't.
Wait.
So, this one I think isn't for you guys' class. But when I look and see, they tried to put this in as the equation, and that was incorrect. 1.21 was the final answer, but if I go into hints, I can see what the actual equation was. And that we needed to add P and 75, we needed to multiply everything by 3 instead of equal to 580. So that was our equation, that was our answer. So going back and doing this is really good practice for the word problems part of the test. Everything else in the review packet I gave you is good practice for the other 2 sections of the test. Right? You guys don't have much time, but I'll say for like the next 5 minutes, work through either of those. Next class, find any questions you want to go through, double check. And we will go through those first, as well as Khan Academy, those math, if you want to go through either of those next class before we take the test. Bring those. But you have the next couple of minutes, or the next 5-ish minutes to work.